Would you agree that the last 6 to 12 months have been at the minimum interesting? I thought so. And the reason I asked the question is this. Would you like the next 12 months to not only be good, but be the best 12 months of your life so far? In your business, in your health, in your relationships? I thought so. If so, you've come to the right place. And thank you for being here. My name is Blair Singer, best-selling author of Little Voice Mastery, How to Win the War Between Your Ears in 30 Seconds or Less and have a great life. The reason I'm glad that you're here is the one thing that I know is if you are watching this now, if you're listening to me now, what you know is you have way more to offer, way more to give, and way more to accomplish. This program is designed for you to have all the things that you want in your life, the income, the relationships, the health, by tackling the number one issue that stops most people from getting what they want. It's that little voice between your ears. Some of you may know me as best-selling author of Little Voice Mastery, Rich Dad Advisor to Robert Kiyosaki, author of 2 best-selling books, Sales Dogs and Team Code of Honor. I'm here to talk to you about a subject that I have worked with clients and businesses, individuals, entrepreneurs in over 25 different countries over the last 25 years, helping them achieve extraordinary levels of sales income, satisfaction, and team growth. That's all in store for you in this particular program. And the way we're going to tackle this program, it's going to be fun. It's going to be interactive. I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions. Now, let me ask you this question. Are you sick of the questions yet? Are you sick of me asking another question for you? Okay, good. So I don't do this to make you feel like a 5-year-old or a 2-year-old. I do it for a very specific reason. If I stood here and I said, I've got at least 12 hours of material with 55 PowerPoint slides and 30 bullet points on each one, would you fall asleep? Of course you would. Have you ever been to a presentation like that? Of course you have. So I'm not going to do that. If you learn one thing from all the programs that we're going to be working with you on, it's this one right here. And that is this, is that learning requires what? Energy. I can't hear you. No, seriously, I can't hear you. Learning requires energy. Say it. Yeah. Now, the reason I have you interact is this. There's another rule of thumb when it comes to education, and that's this. You learn a lot more when you're awake than when you're asleep. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to interact. You're going to have a workbook. Periodically, I'm going to have you go into your workbook, do specific exercises. I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions. I want you to answer those questions out loud. We're going to be doing a lot of interactivity and make this a lot of fun because you will retain and remember a lot more if we do it that way. So you agree? A little louder, please? Okay, good. So let's get started, if you will. Many years ago, my first job was in sales. And I had never sold anything in my entire life. And I remember that I had to go out and sell $10,000 worth of desktop calculators door to door, and I was abysmal at it. Even though the company that I work with gave me what we call business development training. In other words, they taught me how to sell. They taught me a little bit about about the product. I still didn't do very good. My results were just a little bit better. But one day, a friend of mine came to me and says, you know, you really ought to go take this personal development program to work on yourself. I go, I don't need to work on myself. He goes, you really need to work on yourself. Because my life at that point was not doing so well. Bad divorce, lost some money, not doing well in sales, and virtually broke. He says, you really ought to go. So somewhere in the middle of this personal development program, I realized that there was one thing in common with the money I had made and lost, the relationships that had worked and had not, and that was me. Now, some of you are thinking, no kidding, you idiot. But for me, that was a major revelation at the time. And all I know is, after I took the personal development program, even though we weren't even talking about sales, my numbers shot up every single time I took a personal development program and went from being broke to becoming #1 in sales within 18 months. So what we're going to be doing in this program on Little Voice Mastery is we're going to be focusing on the personal development side. But before we do, let me talk to you a little bit about the business development tools that you will need that we will actually cover in other programs in this academy. All right, so let me ask you a question. What type of development is required for outstanding success? So in order to achieve maximum income, there are some business development skills that you must master. So we're going to cover that real quick. I'm sure you're interested in that, right? I didn't hear you, right? Good. Thank you. So the first skill you absolutely must have in business, I don't care if you own a business, you work in a business, you've got to know how to sell. Why? Because sales equals income. Now I want you to repeat that out loud. Sales equals income. Go. A little louder, please. That's right, because any organization, any individual I've ever seen that's ever had a cash flow problem is because they or somebody in their company doesn't know how to or thinks it's not important to know how to sell. Sales is a life skill, and we'll cover that in other programs. But if you want to build massive and passive income, you also need to know how to build a championship team. That's right, a team that can work with you, that's aligned, pulling together, that will generate income for you whether you're working or not. The third component that I learned many years ago in my own businesses is that you also, particularly as a business owner, need to pick up the skill of learning how to teach. Not only teach, but to teach other people on your team how to what? Sell. That's key. Particularly starting in 2007 when the economy turned around and went a different direction, now everybody on the team must know how to sell. Now that's a subject for another time. When I left the sales organization that I worked for and started my own business, was a trucking operation in Southern California, I learned these tools very quickly. Nothing that I was taught in school. As a matter of fact, most of what you're learning here was never taught in school, so stay tuned. There are a couple other components. One other component is this. To have a business, you also have to have strong systems. Cash flow management systems, referral systems, marketing systems, selling systems, and yes, we're going to be talking about little voice management systems, ways to control the war between your ears in 30 seconds or less. These are critical, otherwise the business is just you and you're working your butt off for not a lot of return. The other skill, business development skill, is accountability. Accountability particularly to numbers, knowing your numbers, knowing what it takes to generate the income you want to have, to gain the muscle mass you want, and the energy and the health that you want to have the relationships you want to have. This is a formula that will prove all those to be true for you. But probably the single most important business development skill that I'm going to be referring to in all the programs is the one right here at the bottom, and it's called the Code of Honor. It's one of the books one of the best-selling Rich Dad Advisor books that I wrote. It's a set of rules that you have for yourself or that you have for your team that holds the team together. You see, one thing I learned many, many years ago is that every great organization, culture, religion, family, sports team has one thing in common. It's a set of rules. The 10 Commandments. Have you heard of the 10 Commandments? Good. I'm glad you've heard of the 10 Commandments. You've heard of the Constitution? Of course. These are classic codes of honor. These are rules that are designed to bring groups together, to hold them together on a mission or a purpose. And we had created one for my little trucking company way back when, my first real business. And when that business almost failed so many times, it was the code of honor that brought the team together and made us one of the fastest growing air freight trucking operations of its kind at that time. And I've worked with organizations like Singapore Airlines and Morgan Stanley, IBM, L'Oreal, Redken, all over the world, helping implement not only these business development tools, but the code of honor to hold the team together. But the one thing that stands in the way of this whole magical formula, there's one thing, and I'm going to ask you to think about, look at this formula, and you tell me what the big problem, because there's a big hole in this thing that will sabotage the whole thing if you don't know what it is. Well, have you figured out the problem? Is it a lack of teamwork? Is it a lack of money? Is it a lack of accountability? Or is it you? So, what is the problem? Have you thought about it? I'm sure you've guessed it. The problem is probably you, or me, or any of us. And the problem actually is right here. See this? This is the problem. This is your brain. Now, this is not your brain on drugs or anything like that, but this is your brain. Now, let me ask you a question. What percentage of your brain do you consciously use? 5%? 2%? Let's say 10, okay? 10%. So if this is the 10% of your brain that you consciously use, this big empty space here, what part of the brain is that? No, it's not unconscious. Unconscious is what happens when you go to the bar and drink too much or you fall asleep in the middle of something. It's not unconscious. It's called the subconscious. Subconscious. And the reason we call it subconscious is because we have lots of memories in there that we don't think about all day long. For example, have you ever been heartbroken at least one time in your life? Now, if you didn't say yes, you're a liar, and I know that because we all have. Of course we have. Let me ask you another question. Have you ever lost money? Of course. Have you ever loaned money to somebody else that didn't pay you back? Of course. We've all, as human beings, we all go through this, and we don't think about it all day long, but it's stuck somewhere in this gray matter of ours, right? Until a moment in time comes, and let's say that you and I are working together and we're doing a joint venture and everything's going great. Our businesses are working well together. We really get along. We see eye to eye on everything. Until one day I come up to you and I say, you know what? There's this opportunity I'm looking for over here and I'm really short on cash. If you could loan me like $60,000, $70,000, I'd be happy to pay you back when I can. Now, if you've been burnt before, what are you thinking? That's right. You're thinking, no way. And what's actually happens, and I really want you to hear this, the minute I ask you for the money, immediately our relationship changes, doesn't it? Think about it. All of a sudden you don't trust me as much, you don't want to hang around with me as much, and here's the important point. This is not just for you, this is for the people that work with you, the people that work around you. Just understand that that relationship immediately changes, and it has nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with me. I may be totally trustworthy. I may be good for the money. What happened, however, is the minute I asked, it triggered a part of your what? Yeah, that's right, your subconscious that came up in the form of something I call your, that's it, your little voice. You know the little voice I'm talking about? It's a little voice that says, what little voice? I don't have a little voice. That's the one I'm talking about. Mine sounds like my mother. I don't know what yours sounds like. Think about it. Do you have a little voice? Let me ask you this. Do you have more than one little voice? Of course you do. I got a whole chorus line up here. But the bottom line is this, is that the big saboteur to all the business development skills, to all the dreams that you have, and let's just take a look at this for a second, is if this represents you and whoever it is you want to be, and whatever it is that you want, whether it's money, whether it's better relationships, better health, better lifestyle, my experience that the number one thing that's going to stop you is that little voice. That's the little voice that's going to stop you. Because you know what? Think about it. Getting healthy is not a big deal, right? Eat well, drink a lot of water, get a little exercise. So if that's so easy, why is over half of America fighting with a weight problem? It's not because they don't know what to do. It's because there's something called your little voice up here that somehow is sabotaging it. And in this program, we're going to learn how to handle that. Particularly, I'm going to show you what my little voices look like and maybe what yours look like in the next section. So stay tuned. So by now, you probably got a good idea of what the little voice is and how it shows up. And probably one of the most common little voice statements, that incessant chatter that bugs you in the brain, is one that I call not blank enough. Now you can fill in the blank. It'll be not smart enough, not fast enough, not old enough, not young enough, not pretty enough, not good looking enough, not talented enough, whatever it is that when you come up against that moment where you have the opportunity to get bigger, is that the little voice says, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough. And again, the real issue here is to understand one thing. The little voice is not really you. That's right, it's not you. It's a composite of your teachers, your parents, preachers, the media, friends, politicians, whatever the case might be, that all sit back there in your subconscious that at the moment that you show up to do something, erodes your confidence, creates fear, non-deservedness, creates procrastination, lack of authenticity, give up on your dreams. So we don't want to do that anymore, okay? As a matter of fact, I got a couple pictures of my little voice. You want to see my little voice? Okay, good. I'm going to show you my little voice. So, you know this little voice? This is the, you know this one? Right. This is the one that sits there just when you're ready to take on something, just when you think you've got victory in sight, whack, and find some way to sabotage it. I'm sure that's happened to you at least once, right? Familiar with that little voice? Good. Or how about this one? You know this little voice? This is road rage little voice. This is that moment where if somebody gives you one more problem, you're going to reach out, grab their throat, and squeeze it until their eyeballs pop out. And again, high emotion, low intelligence, not a good place to be, okay? Or maybe you're familiar with this little voice, right? This one actually is my mother without the hair. It's like, I told you you shouldn't do that. I told you you're not smart enough. I told you you're too greedy. La, 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 la. Right? That beating yourself up. Have you ever beaten yourself up at least once today? Of course you have, but you got to be very careful of that because that takes your energy down. And like I said in the very beginning, learning requires what? Energy. The other thing you're going to learn in sales is that two people come together in a selling situation, person with highest energy generally wins. You know what I'm talking about? Do you have children? If their energy is higher than yours, who wins? And if you don't have that experience, I'll loan you my kids and they'll wear you out. But the bottom line is you've got to keep your energy up, so you've got to be careful of these little voices. How about this little voice? It's like, oh, the government will take care of me. Somebody save me. I'm afraid. I can't. You know, never being, wanting to make more money, wanting to make a sales call, wanting to go to the gym, wanting to form a new relationship with somebody, but being afraid. Well, what if I fail? What if I can't do it? What if it doesn't work? All that stuff. You've got to learn to master your little voice. Or maybe that you have one of these little voices. I have this one. This is the stubborn little voice. It's like, well, if everybody just listened to me, the world would be fine. You know, it's everybody else that's messed up. It's not me, you know. And this is like what I call my 35 to 45 to 55-year-old little voice that just doesn't want to change. Just stubborn and thinks that the whole rest of the world is the problem. Back in 1982, when I went to that first personal development program, I realized that the problem, one thing in common with all the things that had worked and not, was me. Or maybe your little voices look like this. Should I or shouldn't I? Can I or can't I? Now remember the workbook you downloaded at the beginning of this program? Good. I want you to turn to the common little voice issues portion of it right now, because I want you to do something. When it comes to the results that you want, what are the limiting little voices? I showed you some of mine. What are the limiting little voices that pop up when you try? I want you right now to sit down and make a list. What are the little voices that pop up when you try to go lose weight, when you try to make another sales call, when you're trying to improve a relationship, when your emotion is high and your intelligence is low? Make a list of what that little voice is actually saying, and next to each one, where did that little voice come from? When was the first time that you started doing that? Or was it your parents that did the same thing and you're just copying them? It'll be very enlightening for you to go through this process, and trust me on this. By simply doing this process, you are already automatically beginning to reprogram the little voices in your brain so that now you're in control rather than the little voices being in control. So let's get right down to the meat of the issue here. how would you like to have a couple of techniques, little voice mastery techniques, to control that chatter between your ears so that when it comes up, you're in control rather than letting it control you? First thing you got to remember, by the way, that little voice, like I said, is not necessarily you. It's a composite of all these other influences in your life, and you can disassociate yourself from it. So I'm going to give you one. I'm going to give you one technique right here you're going to like. If you've ever watched sports, have you ever watched sports? Have you ever played sports? Good. So let me ask you this. If you've played sports or watched it, when someone scores a goal or does something good, instinctively, what do the players do? That's right. They celebrate. Headbutts, high fives, chest butts, whatever the case might be. The reason is that's called anchoring a win, or what we call celebrating all wins. Probably one of the simplest, most powerful little voice techniques possible. So I'm going to ask you to do something right now just to demonstrate what I'm talking about. If you've got somebody else with you, this will be really good. If you don't, pause for a second, bring somebody so they can do this with you. Go ahead, I'll wait. Come on, go get somebody else. Okay, good. All right, good. So now you got somebody else sitting there. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to do something that maybe your little voice doesn't like. Maybe your little voice is going to think, oh, that's too childish. Or if you're overseas from another country, oh, that's so American, or whatever the case might be. Just tell your little voice to shut up and do it anyway, okay? Here we go. I want you to turn to that person next to you, give them a high five, and tell them they're awesome. Ready? Go. You're awesome. Come on, do it. Now, if you're by yourself, nobody's there, take your right hand, make a fist, and say, I'm awesome. Come on, do it. Nobody's watching. Good. Thank you. Excellent. Now, let me just ask you a question. When you gave the high five, what happened to the level of energy in you and around you? Did it go up or down? Of course, it went up. And my other question to you is, how long did that take? Seconds. Seconds. Look, the distance between you and where you want to go is not years away, it's seconds away. We do programs where I teach people sales, and we do entrepreneurship and presentation. I've had people generate $35,000 in sales in 10 minutes. One individual alone did $22,000 of sales in his business by talking to his company, his team on the phone, $22,000 worth of business in 5 hours, which is more than they do in an entire month. Now you're thinking to yourself, your little voice is now going, well, how is that possible? It's possible when you understand how to get the little voices out of the way by using some of these techniques. Let me give you another couple examples here. So, from now on, by the way, celebrate all wins. Whenever you get a win, whenever somebody else gets a win, high-five them, anchor it with a fist and say yes. Probably the most important thing you can do, because the energy goes which way? Up or down? That's right, it goes up. And remember, I just said a little while ago, two people come together, highest energy wins. And if you're in business and you're in a relationship, you know that 99% of the battle is sometimes getting yourself in the right energy state to be able to handle the challenge at hand. So celebrate all wins. Okay? Give yourself another high five, or give the person next to you a high five, say you're awesome. All right, good. Let's cover a couple more real quickly here. One of the big problems that happens is sometimes we get into a high emotional state. Now, there's a problem with high emotion. When your emotion is high, what's low? Your intelligence is low. That's right. I mean, think about it. When was the last time you probably said something when you were really upset and then regretted it 10 seconds later? Have you ever done that at home? Of course we have. So, again, you have to have little voice techniques to control that a little bit. Little voice techniques like, how do I want to feel right now? How to handle an objection properly so that I can stay present. How to be able to shift my mood level instantly so that I'm not affected by those things that are around me. As a matter of fact, we will be talking about some of these other techniques about how to retain your authenticity, how to retain your control of a situation no matter what your emotions are doing. So stay tuned for more of that. Look, the bottom line here is you would not be on this program with me unless you wanted better results, right? Think about it for a second. What results do you want to have in your life over the next 6 to 12 months? More money? Better health? Better relationships? How about just to have a relationship might be good too, right? Now, my question to you, however, is where do your results come from? Think about it. Would you like to be in better physical shape? Hopefully you said yes. Now, let me ask the question. Do you realize that even though you want to be in better physical shape, that lying in bed in the morning and visualizing yourself running is not going to get you in shape? That ain't going to work. Have you tried that already? Yes, so have I. It just doesn't work. So what we know about results is what gives you results are the right behaviors. Certain behaviors give you results. In other words, nobody ever got fat eating one piece of chocolate cake. There's a series or pattern of behaviors that make that happen. Nobody ever got rich overnight. Really? I mean, really? There was a lot of behaviors and effort that went into making that happen. So certain behaviors get you results. Now, let me just ask you for a second before I go any further. Let's take getting rich for a second. How do you get rich? Now, if you're from where I came from, which is Ohio, the Midwest, the immediate answer is to work hard. Now, I want you to hold on to that thought for a second, because that's a behavior, working hard. And we're going to see if that helps you get rich here in a second. So now let me ask you, where do your behaviors come from? Okay, good. Your behaviors come from what I call your mindset or your attitude. That's all the little voice stuff. For example, have you ever had at least one bad day? You know, the traffic's bad, you know, you had an argument with your significant other, or your boss was having a bad day, and your day seems to go in the toilet the same way. Does that make sense? Of course. I mean, we've all been there. And one of the differences between great athletes, great business owners, great entrepreneurs, and just great parents for that matter, is the ability to control the mindset no matter what's going on around you. You think of people like Muhammad Ali or Michael Jordan. These were great athletes that no matter what was going on could control their mindset. We call that little voice mastery. You got to be able to control that. Now, the next question I have for you, now we're getting a little deeper into little voice mastery here. Where does that mindset and attitude come from? Think about it for a second. Well, I think you probably guessed. It comes from what I call your conditioning or your environment, how you grew up, where the influences around you, the conditioning. Yeah, you went to school, what you learned in school, what you learned in church, what you learned from your parents, what you learned from your friends and experiences. So conditioning drives the mindset or the attitude. So let me give you an example. We said, how do you get rich? And maybe instinctively, if you're like many people said, work hard. So where did that thought come from? What was the conditioning thought, conditioned thought? Well, in school, if you went, did you go to school? I'm sure you went to school. If you went, yeah, you went to school. Okay, so if you went to school, then you know that they told you that if you work very, very hard in school, you get good what? Grades. Now, is that true? Not necessarily for everybody. And then if you work really hard in school, they said, whoever they are, said, then you could get a good what? Job. Now, is that true? No. Over 1 million Americans have found out that that's not true. And then someone said that once you get a job, if you work very hard, you'll make a lot of money. But I'll bet that you know people that don't work nearly as hard as you do, but that make more money than you do. Now, I don't have a problem with hard work. But hard work alone, if that's your only source of conditioning, is not going to get you rich. And so what ends up happening with improper conditioning, even though you work hard, you're a good person, you do all the right things, you don't end up with being rich, you don't end up with the health, you end up with what I call frustration. That's right, frustration. And what frustration is your husband, wife, significant other yelling at you, how come we're not making it, getting ahead? Why is this not working? You're working like a dog, you're working 24/7, you're not taking vacations, you don't seem to be getting ahead even though you're doing all the right things. It's because somewhere in there, your conditioning isn't getting you, the conditioning needs to be changed to get the results that you want, which is what we're going to work on here. And most importantly, your little voice is blocking it right now. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I want you to turn to the results model part of your workbook right now. And I'm going to give you a little assignment. I want you to make a list of the areas of frustration you have in regard to the results that you want and that seem to be eluding you, whether it's around money, health, relationships, with your boss, with coworkers, and make an extensive list. Then, where do they come from? Where did you get? What's the conditioning that's making that happen? What is the behavior pattern that doesn't seem to be working, and where is that coming from? Again, don't worry about trying to solve it right now. Your brain is amazingly resilient, and once you understand origin and source, your brain will come to the proper conclusions, and you will begin to see results happening in your life immediately. So do it now.